Hey Eagle fans, it's EaglefanKarl. This is my second in a series of videos I'm doing previewing the season. It was a conversation I had last Saturday with my cousins Craig and Steven, where we talked about the Eagles, broke it up into three videos so they wouldn't be quite so long. The first video we talked about offense. I'll put a link up there that you can check out that video if you missed that one. This video, the second video, is going to be on defense. So I hope you enjoy our conversation that we had about the defensive side of the football. So we're going to talk about defense and special teams. My biggest question, and you know my biggest gripe with the defense, is always not the players. It's the guy calling the shots. Is Jim Schwartz going to learn what a blitz is this year? Because it drives me nuts that he just does not blitz. Maybe it's because I'm so, I grew up, my teenage years were watching the Buddy Ryan defenses. And then, of course, a lot of my adulthood was watching Jim Johnson call defenses. I just miss that, every once in a while just selling out and going all out the quarterback and seeing if they can stop him before the quarterback can get the ball out of his hands. Is Jim Schwartz going to learn how to blitz this year, or are we just going to be destined with more of the same 3rd and 15 playing 14 yards off the wide receivers bullcrap that we get from him?
Yes. I mean, sadly, I think that's what it is. I don't think he's gonna just like change or all of a sudden be like, oh yeah, now it is blitzing time. I think his style is who he is. I think it's just gonna be how his play style is. I don't think he's gonna change. I think it's just gonna stay, that whole non-blitzing when we should be.
Yeah. What do you think, Steven?
Well, I think so. So two thoughts. One thing that could help him blitz more is if we have two starting caliber safeties. And so I know that sometimes he likes to send Jenkins and sometimes with McLeod. If we have both those guys healthy, then maybe he'll be more prone to send one of those guys.
Yeah.
So maybe not an all-out blitz like you're talking about, but a safety blitz. And we even saw a little bit of that in the preseason game that we just saw. My bigger question is not will he learn how to blitz, but will he learn how to play press coverage? So to me that's the bigger frustration. I mean the whole thing is predicated on your lineman is getting pressure, but to me I'd love to see them not get killed by dink and dunks, and have someone at least play a little bit of press coverage once in a while. That's the bigger complaint in my book.
Totally agree with that. And I saw that the other night in the preseason game that obviously I watched the first half when the Ravens, ran up the score on us. And, I got to listen to the stupid Ravens announcers, Brian Billick being their color guy, by the way.
Oh,
and on the one touchdown, though, it was close in, and the wide receiver was in single coverage on the outside. I forget which touchdown it was, but he got an easy release, and it was just a throw high, and Brian Billick's talking about there's no defense for that kind of throw and that kind of catch, and trying to make the Ravens sound all that great. And I yell at the TV, yeah, there is if you jam the receiver right at the line and disrupt the route right away. There is a defense for that.
Yes, there is.
But the way the Eagles played it, no, there wasn't. Because, if you're going to give a receiver free release off the line in those kind of situations, of course you're going to get a touchdown in those kind of scenarios.
Yeah.
It's a good point. It's the press coverage stuff that probably drives me nuts more than anything. The sticks defense. It's like, where we're going to make you catch the ball underneath and make the tackle before you get the first down. It's like, yeah, that works if they do that. But then if they don't and they run past the sticks, you've given them a free release, and now they can run wherever they want. And if you do touch them at that point, you're going to be hit with a flag. So it's just, that's a very good point. Talking about the pass rush, though, are you guys concerned about the loss of Chris Long and Michael Bennett and what that's going to potentially mean for the pass rush? Or do you think that that's an area where we're going to be fine in terms of our pass rush from the defensive line itself?
I think we have the guys to do it still, but at the same time, I am a little concerned because it doesn't matter how good your defensive backs are. If you don't have a pass rush, you're not getting it. And if you're not blitzing, you have to depend on your defensive ends to get around that end to push the pocket in. And I think we do still have, like, with Curry and Graham stuff to still be able to push it in, but I mean, we're missing two guys on our rotation, so clearly we don't have as many fresh legs we could rotate in and out. So I'm a little concerned about that.
All right.
I think we did downgrade a little bit in the defensive ends, but I think we upgraded with the defensive tackles.
Good point.
I think that the pressure up the middle this year is going to be just wreaking havoc. And so Fletcher Cox next to Malik Jackson, and then take one of those guys out and put Tim Jernigan in, and even the other guys, Hector and Hester, those guys. I think one of them we traded, but those guys are decent backups and probably would be starting or at least second on some other teams. So I think the way we'll keep those tackles fresh, we'll kind of make up for it. And then, getting a little ahead of ourselves here, if Derek Barnett can step up and become what he can be, that's really going to be great.
Yeah, I agree with that. I really think that Barnett, I'm expecting big things out of, and hopefully he can take that next step. I think that, and you make a good point about, your defensive ends look a lot better if your quarterback has pressure coming right up the middle and he's got to roll out and he's rolling right into Brandon Graham or Mike or Derek Barnett or one of those guys. So yeah, I think that's certainly something that we can look for, and hopefully that ends up. And the other thing I think also could potentially help this pass rush, if you looked at how good our pass rush was in the Super Bowl run, a lot of that had to do with the fact that we had big leads in a lot of those games. So if the offense is putting pressure on the other team's offense to keep up, so to speak, that could really help the defense and the pass rush, because when you're up by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, you don't have to worry about the run game. You're just going to be rushing the quarterback, and I think that's really going to potentially be something that could help. Talking about guys we didn't bring back, though, you think we're going to regret not bringing back Jordan Hicks? Hicks, obviously, I think was a great linebacker for us for a number of years. Had injury problems, just couldn't stay healthy a lot. But when he was in there, he was always really effective. The guys that they brought in to sort of replace him, I think are question marks, in my opinion, at this point. Maybe one of them works out, and we're sitting here saying, why were we worried? But I got to admit, I am a little bit worried about the middle linebacker position. What's your guys' thoughts?
I think the linebackers are going to be the breakout squad of the whole season.
You do?
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of people that we don't really know about, but I think they're going to step up and kind of be the surprise. Like we were saying, we're kind of worried about it right now, but I think they know which guys they're picking and what they're going to do. And the guys that are returning are going to be stud enough to like hold up ground and hold base.
What do you think, Steven? Well, I like what Craig just said. I just don't know if it's true.
That's optimistic.
I hope it is. But honestly, I wouldn't, even if the linebackers don't step up like we hope they do. I don't know if we would look back and say we should have kept Jordan Hicks. So I even if they don't step up and it is a weakness in our defense, I wouldn't crush him for getting rid of Jordan Hicks. He's just too injury prone. And so even though it would have been nice to fill that spot in with somebody, I don't know if Jordan Hicks was the guy.
And that's really the bigger issue too. Is okay, you don't bring back Jordan Hicks, but what are you going to do then in replacement? And I think that if after week 3 Jordan Hicks is out with an Achilles injury or something like that, we're going to sit there and say, oh, what are we worried about? Yeah. But it's what they could have done in relation to that position that really sort of potentially hurts. I love what Craig said. I hope
I'm all in on that.
I'm really excited that they're moving Mamula from linebackers. I think it's really going to help out the whole team.
So I can break out my Mamula jersey? Is that what you're telling me?
Right? Bring back the Mamula jerseys. Good style again.
Well, I will say this. In terms of breakout guys, the one thing, you look back on the Super Bowl run year, and it takes a lot of players having good seasons to obviously win a Super Bowl. But I think one of the underrated guys in that Super Bowl run and how well he played was Nigel Bradham. And I think he was so solid, especially in terms of his tackling and all that kind of stuff, that if you get that kind of performance out of a linebacker, let's face it, the Eagles generally are probably only playing 2 linebackers on most downs anyway, because they're generally going to play with five defensive backs. That the linebacker position has not been as valued, especially by the Eagles. So hopefully, we can figure out, the best way to accomplish that and figure out the best tandem. I just will say this about linebacker: I don't think it's Nate Gary. I just too many times I see him getting blown off a ball or whatever it is, and I'm just not convinced that he's probably a great special teams guy, but if he's starting a game, that always concerns me.
Yeah.
Moving off of the linebackers, assuming there's no major injuries, the cornerback position's a little tricky because of guys that aren't necessarily healthy going into the beginning of the season. So that sort of makes it difficult to ask who the starters at the cornerback's going to be at the beginning of the year. So the way I'm asking the question is, assuming there's no major injuries, who's the starting cornerbacks at the end of the year? Really what I'm trying to get at is, who do you think our best 2 cornerbacks on this team are if everyone's healthy? In other words, who's starting at the 2 cornerback positions? And what are your thoughts on that?
This is a hard question because I feel like kind of across the board, they're all kind of in the C+, B-, B range for all of them. I don't think – the ones we're working with, I don't think there are any that are D's and F's, but I don't really know if we have any A's or even A- on the team. So in my mind, it's kind of like,
you're average or above average.
Yeah. You go from a B+ to a B- guy, and you can plug and play for all of them. Even Darby, who's probably the best. Last year he wasn't playing that well before he got injured, and now he's coming off an injury. So I mean, I think kind of I like LeBlanc, but even that, I mean, pick a name, put him out there.
Out of the hat.
I mean, I'm almost the same way as you are too. It's like you got a whole bunch of like kind of filler guys, but you got no like real like stud that you're like, I gotta put that guy out there because he's like think about like the Madden games, like you had the guys that are like in the 70s and 80s. That's kind of like where we are. We don't have like that guy. It's like 98, like the best guy that you're gonna like always get and put out there to be the number 1 guy that boosts your team. I got guys who can go in. So, but I think Jones and Mills are probably like the 2 that I think if like anybody's healthy, if they're all healthy by the end of the year, I think those 2 are the guys that are kind of like.
So you're discounting Darby with that then?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think
you've moved on.
Yeah, I moved on, but
I can get that really. Mills gets burnt a lot deep, but I love his attitude and the fact that he's not afraid to go up against the best receivers. I love him in red zone situations because I think he can get physical with some of those bigger receivers, and he certainly doesn't shy away from that. I'll always remember how he covered Jones in the end zone in the playoff game against the Falcons.
Yeah,
and so I see that kind of play out at Mills, and I'm always going to be a fan of that. Obviously the question with him at the beginning of the season is health, which is sort of why I asked it about the end of the year. And I could certainly see what you're saying, Craig. I think another guy that we haven't talked about is Avonte Maddox. I think he's another one of those guys that's been good, but he's certainly not a standout guy that you're going to absolutely always play. So I think that sort of makes it interesting to try and figure out exactly who the best cornerbacks on this team are. I think we can all agree that it's not really clear, and for that reason, if one of these guys gets hurt, I'm not as concerned about it. And that sort of does lead to the next question. Who's the one guy on defense you don't want to see the Eagles lose? Go ahead, Steven. You took mine, so I'll let you go ahead and say yours first.
Well, I took Jenkins because he plays pretty much every position. And so he's kind of the starter safety, but then the backup and the filler. Plus then his leadership, his ability to kind of command the field and help these younger guys, these kind of B average defensive backs that we have, he kind of makes them better, even as the game's going on, helping them out. So that's a guy that if you lose that leadership and you lose the versatility. The versatility is really the word that makes him so valuable.
Yeah, and I would also say with him as well that sort of like how I viewed Kelsey on the offense in that Super Bowl run, the fact that we didn't lose him was critical. I think not losing Jenkins in the Super Bowl run was critical for the defense. Sort of that other end of it. And yeah, it's his leadership on the field, if nothing else. I love when they mic him up and you hear the stuff afterwards, how he barks out orders to guys. He can break down a play before it happens, and so he knows exactly what's happening on a play lots of times before it's run, and having that on the field is invaluable. And so yeah, he would have been my first choice too, for defensive guys that you just can't afford to lose. So Craig, who's your defensive guy you don't want to see him lose?
Lane Bishop.
We could afford to lose him before we did back in the day, because he's still chasing Jaravicius down Broad Street, I think, in that terrible game that you and I attended.
Oh, seriously,
thanks for bringing up that bad moment.
I think like any of our ends, it's kind of like I'm kind of cheating it by not picking a certain guy, but I mean, if we're getting rid of our ends, and we don't want to get someone that's like sitting at home watching TV and eating Doritos, in week 4, and it's like, oh yeah, I played football, let me come back and play again.
Are you having dreams of them calling you up? Is that what this is?
Maybe.
Hey, you want to play defensive end for the Eagles?
Okay. Isn't that the trash can kicker guy?
That's a good point. Brandon Graham or Derek Barnett, either of those guys goes down for an extended period of time. I'm not sold on, Vinny Curry and Josh Sweat, stepping up and playing at the same level, those two guys. The guy I'm going to take, and although, Steven, you're talking about the depth we have at defensive tackle, I don't want to lose Fletcher Cox. We lose Malik Jackson, we lose Tim Jernigan. I think we can overcome that. Fletcher Cox is just one of the best defensive tackles in football.
Right.
I'm not going to say the best because there's a guy out in Los Angeles that might take issue with that. But he's probably one of the top 2 in the league in terms of defensive tackles, and he's a guy that I just don't want to lose. He's so versatile against the run and the pass that I would be concerned about losing Fletcher Cox for any extended period of time. So then let's turn our attention to breakout stars. We already we've been talking about this a little bit. I think I know where Steven's going, and Craig seems to be wanting to take a guy who might be playing in special teams. But go ahead and give me your breakout stars for this year.
Well, I was going with a guy who's going to probably start in special teams, but I think he's going to get in a rotation and everything, and I want to pick a young guy that didn't really have too much play and everything. I think Chris Worley. I think they got him from the Broncos, I believe, and he's kind of really haven't played. But I think with the need of linebackers and where we're staying at with a question right now, I think that he's going to come up and some play time and everything. He's a young guy. I think that he's the right size that they want and everything. And not that I'm a betting person on him, but I just think that he'll get some time and he'll get in there and be at least a good second or third at the end of the year.
All right. That's an interesting pick, to say the least. Go ahead, Steven. Who's your breakout star?
We go with Derek Barnett. It's now year 3 for him. It's time for him to step up, be what he can be. He knows what he's doing. He's got his feet under him now. It's time for him to make a difference.
So which one sounds more like convincing? The one that you don't know anything about, or the guy that you're hoping that after year 3 he's good?
Well, let's put it this way. If they both have really good years, I think we're going to consider Chris Worley more of a breakout candidate just because of where he came from versus Derek Barnett, first-round draft pick, as expected. He's finally contributing. So if they both happen, I'll give you the win on this, Craig.
Yeah. I think Craig gets the credit for this if they both happen. Yeah,
it would actually be pretty funny if it does happen.
I'm all for it.
Chris Worley, baby. You heard it here first.
Yes. until I put this video up next week and he's already been cut.
Yeah.
My breakout star is going to be the guy that I originally wanted them to take in the first round of the Derek Barnett draft, but then he went out and blew out his Achilles on his pro day, and that's Sidney Jones.
Oh.
With a guy who I really think has a lot of potential, but had just been dogged his first couple of years with injuries. If he's healthy. All right, so we were talking about how we have a lot of defensive backs who are, C+, B- kind of guys. The one guy I think that could take the step to be like an A kind of cornerback is Sidney Jones. He's got the ability to do it. He just hasn't shown it yet at the NFL level. And I think that, I think a lot of that has to do with the confidence. And if he can actually get some confidence, there's so much of that, I think, that exists at the defensive back position that once he does get some confidence and gets to the point where he knows he can play at this level, then I think he could take a really big jump and become sort of an A kind of a player at the defensive back position. So he's the one guy, at least I'm hoping, is the one that can really take sort of the breakout play. So that's for that reason, Sidney Jones is my breakout player. We do want to talk a little bit about special teams, so I figured I'd just put that in with defense to talk about defense and special teams together. And we all had a joke question. So my joke question was, will Jake Elliott have a higher completion percentage for field goals over 50 yards than for point after attempts? We joke about it, but I think the other night, like he missed like a 45-yarder or whatever. Yep. And Steven texts me and he's like, well, all we needed to do is have a false start to push it back into his range, get it over 50, and then maybe he would have hit it. And as crazy as that sounds, it almost is the way it feels. I mean, originally I was writing a serious question here, and I was going to say, does he going to have a higher completion percentage of field goals over 50 yards than of those between like 40 and 49? But I think that, so I just made it the joke in terms of point after attempts. But I actually have to watch point after attempts because it's not a given with him. Right. But yet, ones over 50 yards, he seems to always come through. Maybe it could be selective because when he misses a 50-yarder, we're like, well, that was a stretch anyway. Right. But, he seems to make a lot of long kicks and miss some ones that you would think should be gimmies. And it drives me nuts. And, he made a lot of big kicks the year we won the Super Bowl, so I'm not going to, throw him off the bus yet, but sometimes I want to.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
I mean, it's one of those things, like you said, he kind of gets the pass because when it comes down to those big kicks, he kind of makes them. But at the same time, it's like, who wants to be like 14 and 12? You know what I mean? Score-wise, if you're missing 2 extra points, it's like, that can hurt you long run. But at the same time, he makes those good field goals, so it's kind of like, it's a tough call, like, because he does make those. I don't know, because I don't think you would get rid of him just because, like.
Well, what's the alternative?
Because there's probably nobody out there that could actually do.
Cody Parker might be available.
Well, maybe we can get him to just kick the extra points, and then
carry 2 kickers on the roster, one for extra points and one for long ones. I don't see that happening. So, all right. I think we've already spent enough time talking about kickers.
There you go.
Move on the punters.
What's that?
Move on the punters.
Yeah, let's move on to punt now. Well, you notice I didn't even bring punters up.
Cameron Johnson's doing just fine.
Yeah, he's fine.
He's great.
The one legitimate question, though, is in the return game, though, for special teams. Darren Sproles probably, I'm guessing, is going to be the punt returner. I would expect that's what they'll do. He's always capable of breaking one. Do you see anybody on this team capable of breaking one on a kick return, though?
Even kick return anymore?
Sproles doesn't kick return, no.
No, I'm saying, does anybody?
Oh, does anybody kick return?
Yeah, it doesn't really.
Everybody just usually they bang it out of the back of the end zone and take a knee, yeah. But occasionally you do get a kick return. So some teams like to kick short.
Do a short kick, yeah.
And force you to do a return. So anybody on this team you think capable of breaking one? And if so, who? Don't just say yes.
Well, it all depends on who they put back there for the young guys, I guess. It normally is like the rookie or first year kind of guy. I don't know if they'll put Miles or Sega back there, or if they're too high of a player to be back there, you know. So I don't know. It's going to be one of those young guys that you don't really know much about that are going to maybe take it.
Yeah. I wonder if Corey Clement could jump in that spot as a possibility. He's he's probably number 4 running back, but he has good hands, as we saw, and good runner. I mean, he might be a possibility.
But do you think? I think he's the default kick returner, I think, on this team.
Okay.
But I don't know that he's capable of breaking one for a return where you've got to have sustained speed over 100 yards
Right.
to do that, and that's where I'm. He's going to give you a good return, but I don't know that he's ever going to break one for a touchdown.
I heard Heath Sherman's pretty fast.
No. Maybe we can bring Vi Sikahema out of it.
There you go.
Come on, bye.
Oh. So, what, Steven, you think Clement could break one?
Yeah, I think he could break one.
Okay.
I don't think he will, but I think he could.
I think
If everybody falls down on the other team,
Yeah.
why not?
I think he would be the smart person to put back there. Just, I said nobody wants to see him doing a Greg Lewis and dropping the balls every time it's returned to him. So I mean, I think
Good old Greg Lewis. So there you have it. Those are our thoughts on the Eagles' defense for this season. Obviously, Craig's prediction of Chris Worley didn't work out, as we just found out. He was released today. But we'll see about the other predictions. We'll see if any of those come true, or maybe Worley ends up back on the team in a couple weeks and he's still able to contribute. We'll see exactly what happens with that. In the meantime, like I said, I'll be posting a video probably tomorrow where we talk about our predictions for the season, so be on the lookout for that. And until then, fly Eagles fly.